Welcome back to Operation Freedom, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda, broadcasting from our ancillary bunker, link your main freedom bunker in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor, here for you every Sunday from 2 to 5 Eastern, 24/7 at davejanda.com. Stop on by. You will never be disappointed when you go to davejanda.com, but you will be educated and empowered. And then, it just doesn't stop at that point, then you are obligated to then take that information and network it to your friends and families. And obviously, you have been warriors in that regard, because we would not be at this level in our country as it relates to what occurred this past Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, if you had just consumed information and just sat on it. Now, there was an incredible awakening that's occurred over the last several years, and in particular, last several months. And you've had a direct role in the saving of our constitutional republic, as have all of our guests on today's show and every Operation Freedom show. Every one of our guests has put their lives on the line in giving you information that you'll never get through the bought-off lamestream fake media. My next guest is someone who has been looking out for your financial freedom, your economic freedom, your financial welfare for decades. And he's generated a tremendous amount of grief coming back his way by putting you ahead of the curve. Bill Holter is, I guess, the best way I can summarize Bill is that he is the best forensic economic analyst in the world. And he subspecializes in precious metals. He's a trader at the Miles Franklin organization, milesfranklin.com. And he also, for years, collaborated with the great Jim Sinclair, who was an incredible force in the financial world. Jim died recently, and Jim was known as Mr. Gold. And that torch was passed to Bill upon Jim's passing. Bill, again, is an incredible analyst who tells you what you need to know. And it might not be exactly what you want to hear, because Bill lays it on the line, but he always puts you ahead of the curve. It's my honor to welcome back, oh, by the way, his website, Bill Holter, Holter, BillHolter.com. I'm honored to welcome back Bill Holter. Bill, welcome back to the Operation Freedom show and platform.
Thank you, Dave, for having me.
Bill, what's your... so we had a bit of a stick save, if you will, in hockey on Tuesday. Hard work is not done yet. But what was your take on the election?
First off, I was surprised that the Republicans were able to thwart the cheating that I thought surely was going to come. I was shocked to see a call basically that evening. I do want to say that mathematically, this thing's going down. I mean, Trump winning, Trump cannot change the math.
No.
But what he can do, and this is the bright side, this was my hope. As I said, mathematically, this thing is going down. But what this means is it now will go down under the rule of law, under the rule of law of the U.S. Constitution, as opposed to under the rule of their law, whatever it happens to be for whatever situation arises. I mean, they changed, they treat the law as if it's not an actual law. It's what they decide on any given day.
Well, and when you say that the system is rigged to blow, the financial system, you've always told us, Bill, that it's the debt, DEBT, that will ultimately bring down the system. And we knew at the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of October, the U.S. federal deficit just for 2024 was over $1.8 trillion with a total interest cost of $1.1 trillion. which is ever increasing, and our national debt is up to close to $36 trillion. And Bill, when you have that big a debt, well, I guess you have a couple options how to get out of it. You could grow out of it. I'm not sure how we could do that. The other option is you just default on your debt, right?
Well, and there's a third option, and the third option is what
to inflate away, right?
To destroy the currency and pay the debt back with monkey money. What you started with about the debt, it was the second part that's important. 36 trillion, yes, it's important because it's 125+% of GDP, but the immediate important number was the 1.1 trillion in interest, which if nothing changes, if interest rates stay where they are right now, we're going to pay over 1.5 trillion this fiscal year, and we will pay over 2 trillion next fiscal year. 2 trillion compared to 4.7 trillion in taxes, it blows. It blows at that point because you're talking about over 40% of tax revenue being used to just pay for interest only. And I do want to mention one other thing. You mentioned the deficit for the year was 1.8 trillion. If you back that 1.8 trillion out of GDP, and the reason you would do that is because when they borrow money, they spend it. And when it gets spent, it becomes part of GDP. So if you took 1.8 trillion out of GDP, you would have negative growth. Mm-hmm. And we would have negative growth last year and the year before and the year before, going all the way back to the 70s or even late 60s. Without the deficit spending, we would not be showing growth. We would be showing contraction. So I mean that's the math right there, and the math cannot be changed by anyone. It can only be addressed, and as I mentioned, it will be addressed in, if you want to call it, the bankruptcy court worldwide.
So, Bill, let's look at this debt issue in a macro level and a micro level. If the debt, without a doubt, is bringing down the system, which wasn't an accident and wasn't a coincidence and wasn't from incompetence, right? This is all kind of part of the deal, part of the plan.
It was a plan from 1913 when the Federal Reserve initially started. They knew what the outcome would be. So it was a plan, but it's not a plan over the last 10, 20, 30 years.
No.
This is a 100-year plan.
So from a macro standpoint, Donald Trump calls up Bill Holter. Bill, you've been ahead of the curve on all this stuff. We got a mess on our hands. What do I do? What do you tell him? And then we're going to deal with, on the micro level, I mean, how does a family deal with what's coming down the road? So let's first deal with Donald Trump's on the phone with Bill Holter. Hey, Bill, help me here. What do you suggest I embark on?
Well, my first response would be, sorry, I can't help you because the math is the math. What you're going to need to do is let the system collapse. Let it burn to the ground. Then the system will begin to reboot, but what kind of system will it be? And what you would want would be a gold ratio-backed currency or currency issued directly by the U.S. Treasury so they don't have to pay interest to private bankers for the capital that they're raising. Next, as far as what does an individual family do, you got to get off the train tracks because the train's coming and it's not going to stop. It's going to run you over. So you get yourself out of the system. You want as few counterparties between you and your capital as possible. And just an illustration of that would be, say you own a stock or stocks. Get those stock certificates in your hands. Mm-hmm. Do not allow the broker to hold those certificates because when they bankrupt, those are no longer your stocks. They're on your broker's balance sheet for your benefit. But if they go down, your stocks are going to be used in the bankruptcy court. They're not yours. Same with the bank. You are no longer a depositor. you are a lender, and you're the most subordinate lender. And the laws have been changed beginning in 2014, so 10 years ago. Worldwide, they've started to change laws, or they've changed all the laws now, so that you are not the owner of the asset, you're the beneficial owner. And there's a big difference. The difference being they're actually on the balance sheet of your bank, your broker, your insurance company, or whatever. And when that entity goes down, your assets go down with them. It's part of the Great Taking, and I would urge all listeners, search The Great Taking, spend an hour and a half to read it, and you'll understand, oh my gosh, I got to get my stuff out of the system because they're going to take it.
And the most effective way of getting things out, getting your resources out, financial resources out of the system, and tell me if I'm off on this, is to own something that doesn't have something called counterparty risk, debt associated with it. And and two of the most prominent entities I'm aware of, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, is physical gold and physical silver. Am I off?
Correct. They cannot bankrupt. They're actually the only monies on the planet that cannot bankrupt or default. So yes, getting gold, getting silver in your hands, or having them vaulted privately, not in a bank, because they cannot bankrupt, they're still going to be standing after the system comes down. And even small amounts of gold or silver in individual hands will make those individuals somewhat like a bank themselves, because when everything else is bankrupted, you're going to have capital, you're going to have money that has not bankrupted.
So, Bill, we had the election on Tuesday, November 5th, right? So I want to specifically look at the election and its effect on gold and silver. Fantastic insurance policy, right, if you want to think of it that way, for financial resources, okay? So Tuesday, the election happens. Wednesday, gold and silver went down hard. Thursday, they went up a bit. Friday, down, not as hard, but still down, not a little amount. So what's going on here? Is this, let me just say, what's going on with the precious metals market since the election, and then where do you see it going forward?
Okay, yeah, so there's two schools of thought, and then there's the third, which is reality, and we'll talk about that last. The first school of thought was, okay, Trump won, he's going to right the ship. That was bullish amongst traders for the dollar. So the dollar got strong, and generally speaking, when a currency gets strong or goes up, it's going up against something, and that something would be, real money. Mm-hmm. So that describes Wednesday when gold and silver were down. Then Thursday came along and the Federal Reserve cut rates, which lower interest rates are bullish for gold and silver. So you had a rally in gold and silver. Then you had a little pullback on Friday. The reality is, okay, so it looks like we're going to end up with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican President, which means they're going to be able to pass anything they want to pass. And in today's world, anything that they're going to pass requires spending money, creating more money. And when you create more money, you dilute what's existing, meaning you're going to lower its value. And long term, a Republican everything is super bullish, or a Democrat everything is a super bullish scenario for gold and silver, because it's super bearish for the dollar itself. It's super bearish for the finances of the U.S.
So, Bill, one of the other things that occurred this week is Powell. So you mentioned on Thursday the Fed cut rates quarter percent. And then there was what can only be described as a planted question in the media that has this little press conference with the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Powell. And they said, now that Donald Trump is president, Now, if he asked you to resign, will you resign? And he said, no, I'm not going anywhere. And a lot of people were like, whoa, this is real. Well, actually, Bill, he was actually giving a history lesson that you and I have been giving to people for years. And that is, and you alluded to it earlier in this segment, the Federal Reserve is not a part of the executive, legislative, or judicial branches of the United States government. It is an independent entity that was established in 1913. It's a group of independent bankers that are not looking out for the welfare of the American public or the American economy, but they are looking out for their fellow bankers, or banksters as I call them. So, Bill, he was actually giving a history lesson to people that have been, I don't know, let's just say blind, I don't know, you could even say ignorant to what's really going on in the financial system. Am I off on that?
Well, no, you're exactly right. The Federal Reserve is a private entity. The owners of that private entity are basically 13 banks, 13 banking families. It's not federal. There is no reserve. It is basically a bank that lends money to the U.S. government, but not owned by the U.S. government.
So, tell us what your tea leaves tell us. For example, Judy Shelton is a hard money person. She is an economist by trade. She is very much linked to precious metals and backing of currency and bonds with precious metals such as gold and silver. She, in the first Trump administration, toward the end of his administration, he nominated her for the Federal Reserve Board. Her name was never brought up in the Senate for confirmation. There's talk about Judy Shelton now having some prominent role on the economic side of the equation in the Trump administration. What does that mean to Bill Holter when you hear that?
It means that we have huge change coming, and it may include abolishing the Federal Reserve at some point. It does also mean that gold is coming into the system rather than out of the system. I mean, for years and years, they tried to demonetize gold. Mm-hmm. And what this means is that gold is going to be remonetized. And we're looking at this from strictly a U.S. standpoint. But when you bring the BRICS into it, and if they're going to back their currency by 20 to 40% with gold, mm-hmm. and you're talking about the biggest holders of gold in the world. I mean, supposedly the U.S. has 8,300 tons, but there hasn't been an audit since 1956. So there's no way that amount. I mean, if they lie to you about everything, why would they tell you the truth about how much gold they own?
Right.
And compare that to China, which probably truly has 35,000 metric tons. They're going to be the ones who make the price of gold, whereas the West, for years and years and years, has been the ones that have made the price of gold, and they've suppressed gold, and they've super suppressed silver. China, Russia, these countries that have been gobbling gold up now for the last 10, 15, 20 years, these countries, it benefits them to mark the price of gold up rather than suppress it. And that's what I would expect to happen. And you have to look at it from an international standpoint, a global standpoint, as opposed to a U.S.-centric standpoint.
And Bill, you mentioned the BRICS meeting: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and 126 other countries involved in this platform where they've developed a type of a trading platform, trading system. And at the BRICS meeting at the end of October, prior to that, Putin had announced that Russia was going to create strategic reserves of precious metals, including silver.
Right.
Now, many people said that was not a significant announcement. I believe it was significant. Somebody's right and somebody's wrong on this. What's your take?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely significant because silver is the fuse to blowing up gold. When I say blowing up gold, to remarking it, 5, 10, 50 times the value of where it is right now. You cannot have exploding silver and gold ignore it. That will not happen. And gold is the Achilles tendon to all fiat currencies. I mean, if gold is $5, $10, $50,000, $100,000 an ounce, that shows confidence breaking in the dollar itself. And I do want to mention the announcement from BRICS was pretty much exactly what I thought was going to come out. Mm-hmm. They were not going to come out with a currency right away. Mm-hmm. But they did come out with a good communique. And I think it's extremely interesting to guess who was not at the BRICS meeting? Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, yeah.
The reason being they hold about $800 billion worth of treasuries. And they saw what happened to the $300 billion of Russian treasuries that got sequestered, basically stolen. And they did not show up to the BRICS meeting because they did not want their nearly $1 trillion confiscated.
And I understand it from a reputable source that today President Trump had a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin. And they've agreed for more conversations. One of the issues that they spoke about reportedly was about ending the Russia-Ukraine war. I don't think that was the only thing they spoke about. Bill, what are the odds that they actually spoke about the BRICS system and maybe how the United States could play a role in it? Wait, do you think that was a possible conversation point?
I can tell you, I think it's 100% if they talked about the BRICS, they talked about the dollar as the world's reserve currency. I was at Mar-a-Lago a year and a half ago at a private meeting, and President Trump, at that point in time, he did say some things that I don't believe he would say publicly or on TV, and he did say that he thought the two biggest dangers were nuclear war and the U.S. losing the dollar as the world's reserve currency. So and Trump's family is it's a monetary family. Mm-hmm. They've been into gold for 100 plus years.
Yep.
I can almost guarantee you that the monetary aspect was discussed. I'd be shocked if it was not.
I would too. And the fact that you're starting to see Judy Shelton on Fox Business News and CNBS, I think tells you all you need to know where this is going.
Exactly.
So, Bill, in our final minute and a half together today, I believe it's imperative that folks follow you on a very regular basis, on a daily basis. How can they do that?
You can go to my website. It's simply billholter.com. If you subscribe, anything that's posted will hit your mailbox. All of my interviews are on the website under interviews. And if you want to reach me directly on my business email, it's eholter@proton.me.
Bill Holter, I'd like to thank you for all that you have done, are doing, and will do over all these many years and decades. You tell people what they need to know. Might not be what they exactly want to hear, but it puts them far ahead of the globalist constructed curve that ends in a brick wall. What they want you is to hit that wall and shatter your freedoms, your liberties, and your financial future. I thank you, Bill. Folks, you're listening to Operation Freedom.